So Bernadette, some people may not know that in fact you started the Brave Foundation.
Yes.
So what does the Brave Foundation do?
Yes.
Or when it started, because clearly it's grown. So when it started, what were your aims when you started the Brave Foundation?
Yeah, so you're right. I'm founder of Brave Foundation, and I think it's now, we call it the 15-year overnight success. And so I remember starting Brave with my husband and a great mate, and we had the book, How to Start a Not-for-Profit for Dummies. And before we knew it, we signed the Constitution, and now we have over 35 staff, an incredible CEO, and it is meeting the need of expecting and parenting teens in Australia. But the reason that I started Brave in those very humble beginnings was because it was my story. And so my son, Damon, who is 28 now and is married to his beautiful wife, Beck, and I'm a grandmother to their beautiful baby, Juliet, for a whole 8 months. So it's just so fun. But to actually walk that journey, and I think listening to lived expertise, lived experience, because actually, and it's something even in my systemic work at the moment, actually combining the two and understanding what those needs are on the ground. For me, as a young girl in that situation, I was scared, I was alone, I was in a strict Catholic family, my dad didn't react well, and I wanted to know someone that had lived it, breathed it, and survived it. But I also expected that people would probably want to help me on that journey, and that there might be programs, and I guess in a sense, Brave's what I looked for and couldn't find all those years ago. And it started, I wrote my own journey, which was called a book called Brave Little Bear, which is the meaning of my name. And then after, helping a number of people connect to whatever services they could in their communities for the young girls that they were bringing to me to think about how they could get into school or education, I knew that this was beyond me just volunteering a few days a week, and that's when we knew it was going to be a charity.
So you had to have a conversation with your dad when you were, what, 16?
Yes.
What happened?
It was very scary, and it was actually, I'd met a boy who went to a local state school. We'd been going out for 6 months, and the least likely thing ever happened, and I was going to be having a baby. And so I can remember for my dad, that was just all of the blood drained out of his face, and he didn't know how to respond. He had plans and a dream and a future for me, and Dad, he'd had a tough life himself. He worked 2 jobs so that we could have the outcomes that he never had. And this was his eldest daughter. And so Dad actually, he didn't talk to me until the end of my pregnancy. And it was really, really hard. Wow. And it was at the end of my pregnancy that he gave me a beautiful book, which was a mother and baby care book. And it just had a few lines in it, which are so special to me now. And it just said, "Dear Bern, I know you'll be a great mum. Love, Dad." Wow. And that meant so much before I had Damien. And but very difficult. And, being a parent now of teenagers and young adults, I can understand why he was so upset, and knowing how hard you work for your children and the plans that that God has for them. But then, my dad was actually, he continued to move in that. And after we were able to have a better relationship than ever before, he actually changed his whole life after Damien was born.
Did you just automatically decide to stay at school? What was how did the whole school thing work for you as somebody who's 16 and expecting a baby? Yeah,
I did stay at school for as long as I could at the time. I think the teacher said, "Look, we can tell everyone that you've got glandular fever." They were actually beautiful, and I was at a Catholic secondary college in Melbourne, and they were very protective, I guess, from the point of view that they wanted me not to feel stigmatised at school, and wanted to support me the best way that they possibly could. And so they sent me this big Body Shop gift pack, and then we told everyone that I had glandular fever and I was at home. And it's funny when I look back now, but it wasn't at the time. And they were there was one teacher, Mr. Shield, my Year 10 year level coordinator, and it's something that I say to young people or anyone all the time is, go to someone that you're going to actually be able to receive wisdom from, and sometimes it might feel awkward going to them. They won't probably be your best mate. They're the people that are going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And Mr. Shield was it for me, and he said to me at that time, your journey might be different now, but the destination can stay the same. And so for me, I knew that that meant that I could continue to go on and finish my year 11 and 12, maybe go to uni. I mean, my family hadn't been to uni, so there was no one that had done that in our family, but they were my secret dreams and goals as a young girl. And he actually spoke to who I was as a person. He actually spoke to my purpose. And so I think because of that conversation, Karl, that's what has, you know, it's evoked a real passion in me to be able to make sure we don't miss that opportunity with any young person in Australia, that we find that opportunity and that we build on that however we can.
What was it like holding Damon for the first time as a 16-year-old?
It was amazing. I'd hardly held a baby, and I wasn't a maternal girl. And I can remember thinking that he looked like he had a cone head and he didn't look like he was like on the ads on the TV. And that actually was a real surprise. I remember saying to my mum, you know, do all babies look like this? And she said, oh, he's beautiful. And I was like, yes, I guess he is beautiful, but it was different to what I expected. But what I probably felt, which I felt with my, you know, 3 children, was this overwhelming feeling of protection and care, more than love. And I wasn't expecting that. That feeling when the 2 of us were in the room, that I was solely responsible for this living, breathing, you know, heart-beating baby. That we'd called Damien, and that was a part of my job now. And that level of responsibility, you know, I remembered also thinking I wanted him to have the gift of a teenage life that I didn't have as well. And, you know, like all of those moments were in my mind at that time.
What were some of the major kind of road humps for you over the next 2 years as a young mum? Yeah,
I think really it's probably the road humps that I found as a young mum have taught me well in my life, because something I learned was don't be afraid to ask for help, because people often won't be there to just automatically help you because they won't know that you need help. And they might not be the right people to be asking help from in some situations. So actually finding safe people, and also the people that have got the knowledge, like a maternal and child health nurse or a teacher, or, you know, and sometimes it might have been mum or dad, or in a lot of instances it was actually my mum's friends. So all of a sudden I had these friends having coffee with me that were double my age, but I had more in common with them than my girlfriends that were still going out every weekend and having a grand old time, and here I was at home with a baby. So that actually taught me to not be afraid of asking for help. And that has actually been, my husband said to me, now you must have had coffee with nearly everyone in Australia, and it's not that. It's because I'm actually wondering how they might be able to, how we can help each other to be able to further the things, you know, of Brave Foundation and our young people in Australia, young families in Australia. And but I learned that through having to do it. And I, you know, I made some goals, and that's actually was very important. I made 3 goals for myself at that time, and one of those was to be a good mum. And, you know, as we just reflected, I didn't, you know, I'd hardly held a baby. I needed to learn how to do that, and I needed help to be able to do that.
Were you able to pursue the educational goals that you wanted to?
Yeah, it was incredible. Actually, I finished my year 11 and year 12. Then I went on to do nursing. So Damien thought he was studying to be a nurse. So I remember him coming to lectures with me, and then I continued and completed a graduate diploma in perioperative nursing, which is theatre and anaesthetics and recovery. And and I've done business and studied abroad at Harvard Kennedy and governance and a whole lot of things, which honestly back then, if you had have told me when I didn't know what pathway I would have to finish schooling, like to finish year 11 and 12, and I had to find that pathway, and thankfully I did. But if you had have told me back then that I'd one day be studying at Harvard Kennedy doing an executive public leadership course, I wouldn't have even known what on earth you were talking about. Like I would not have known. But learning for me, I think, has been something that I'm just so passionate about. And to continue to learn and to continue to share our understanding to create a world that, you know, that we see edify, you know, my personal beliefs of faith.
I was going to ask you about that. So what, at that particular period of time, what was your framework of faith? Where was Christian faith or belief for you then?
Yeah, as a young girl, I grew up in a Catholic home, and Mum and Dad, they were traditional Catholics. We'd go to Mass every Sunday. You'd never miss it. You sat on the, you know, the left-hand side behind the piano and the same singer, and that was church. You did it the same, you know, week in, week out. And I had this real passion though, which was so funny, for Jesus. And my mum would actually take me to visit this older gentleman who was a retired priest. And I would speak to Father John, and he was a recovering alcoholic, and I'd talk to Father John and say to him, Father John, can you tell me this is when I was 5 or 6, can you tell me the Jesus story? And he'd say, Bernadette, again? And I'd like, can you tell me again? And week after week, I'd hear the Jesus story. And then I'd say to my mum, can I, at Christmas, you know, can I tell the Jesus story? And she'd say, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit embarrassing, Bern, you know, like, do you really want to tell? And that's so not what Catholic families do. And, you know, and I thought, well, no, she's got a good point. That probably is a bit embarrassing. So I didn't really share it. But I had this real personal, was like a pull into a relationship in faith. And so I had real convictions, and I loved going to Mass. I did the readings at Mass until I fell pregnant, and then, you know, thought that maybe I wouldn't do that for a little while. And then so faith was always important to me, but it was certainly different. I did go to a Youth Alive seminar, I think, as a teenager, and that's where I really experienced, I guess, my own personal relationship with Christ, and things really, you know, they solidified for me at a personal level.